All right, so basically, no, I don't want to use the word basically too much, but honestly, it's going to be that way. So what we have here is a very, very basic signal flow. We're going to talk through all this, but if you learn this, when I learned it, I literally had to draw it like a million times. And this is a variation of what I learned. I had to draw this like a million times and then draw it back without help and then go from there. So if you kind of get this concept here of how audio flows through an audio board, and then later on we'll talk about how it goes through a sound system. But if you get the concept of the idea of here, let me enlarge this here, of how audio goes through a console, you can get on anything, whether it's a little 2-channel mixer thing, little Mackie thing, or is it an SQ or a giant Studer or M32, it doesn't really matter. Audio works exactly the same way. We're not going to get too much into what a decibel and all this stuff, but we'll have those conversations, right? Ongoing conversations later on if you want to ask me what a dB stands for. All right, I'll talk you through that, and I'll give you all the links and all the white papers, and your brain will melt. We're not going to do that today because our brains are already melting, at least mine is. All right, so let's just go through this here. Yeah, we'll do some hands-on here when we get to later on. All right, so in a sound system, we'll talk through this and we'll split it up. You see where we have mic. Let me pop this up. There we go. That's what I want. All right, so mic. If you watch your MXU videos, we're getting feedback. Hey, that's cool. Yay, I did my job. All right, we've got two different types of, two categories of mic DIs. We've got a standard microphone. Most of you guys have seen this at some point, the SM58. We'll have all these, we'll pass them all around. Actually, Matt, could you do me a favor? Can you hand these and just kind of pass? We'll just pass them around, sorry. We've got hand wipes. If you want to wipe something down, I'll keep reiterating that. It's just the age, but I don't want to assume. Different types of microphones. We've got dynamics, we have condensers, DIs. The difference between a dynamic and a condenser basically is a condenser uses electricity, it's 48 volts DC to operate the circuitry. That's really it. I don't want to get too much more into the weeds on that. We can have that conversation offline. Just remember that a condenser, if you use a condenser, like George right there has a large diaphragm condenser. So if you plug that into your sound system and you tear it apart because it never worked, what a piece of garbage that someone spent $500 on and it doesn't work, and you go back and go, oh, oops, I forgot to turn on phantom power. There we go, now it works. It needs power. Dynamics do not. Now, direct boxes, direct injection boxes, what DI stands for, some of them are passive, some of them are active. And it's the same concept again with mics or DIs. You've got Suzanne, you have wireless there, but it's the same thing. Just we'll talk about that wireless here in a little bit. So active versus passive, basically it needs phantom power. It has active circuitry.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm familiar with wireless, and I'm familiar with wired mics. What's a direct injection box?
All right.
What does it do?
So what does it do? It basically takes an instrument,
Okay.
plugs it in here, and gets it at the correct voltage coming out so that it doesn't overload an audio board.
Okay.
Right? Bill's just commenting, I saw that video. That's right. So in the MXU stuff, there is, hey, what's this box do and what is it, right? So that's why I want to keep it super, super, I'm feeling the judgment from like Drew and Stucky over here for my Peyton over my super oversimplification of what a direct box does. But in general, if you have a bass guitar, if you have a keyboard, if you have an acoustic guitar, and you need to get that to the sound system, you need to match that level coming out, and it is different levels. We'll keep it at that. And so a direct box helps you do that, direct injection.
Is it impedance match or what?
Yes.
Okay.
But we will not utter those words here.
Okay.
We will not discuss impedance matching, but yes, that's what's going on. Basically, there's different levels coming out of those instruments, and we need to match them. Otherwise, and we'll get into this, is the audio consoles in general say in general because there's that 1% that will be off for whatever reason. They're made in Germany or whatnot. Who cares? They all follow the same electrical concepts of inputs and outputs that were designed 100 years ago. And we'll specifically talk about that here in a moment. But so that's what we're trying to get to is like, here's the standard that was developed 100 years ago. We're still using that standard today. How do we get to that standard? All right, cool. You guys can keep passing around until you're done and just kind of start piling them up. I think they're probably going to end up piling up over by Nick. That's fine. Or you can hold on to them and play with it and trace it out and get bored with it, whatever you want to do. Just don't color on it. Yeah, that's fine. I do want the wireless back over near me, the pack and the handheld. You got that over there. That's fine. So that's what a mic and DI is, right? That's at the stage. And then you got one of these crazy kids. You get one of these, mic cable, right? Like him, love him. Actually, we're going to come back to it. I'm not going to do the coal thing. We'll come back at touchy-feely time. That's what I call it. So as we come into the console, I'm not even going to show you the console yet. We're just going to talk about this. So mic and DIs, right? We need to take sound coming out of your mouth, coming off an instrument, electrically coming out of an instrument. Those sound waves have to turn into electricity somehow. This is how we do it. We use microphones and direct boxes. Then as it comes into the console, it hits some circuitry. It hits phantom power. That's 48 volts DC. And what that does is, like I mentioned previously, that activates those active circuits in those microphones or direct boxes, right? That some active DIs have active circuitry. Condensers have active circuitry. The reason why they do that, we're not going to discuss, but we can talk about that offline later on. The one thing to know is dynamics and condensers, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're louder. It's just the difference is in how they listen to audio. All right. So if you have a super soft spoken singer that will only ever sing like this, and they're never gonna get any louder, you want to punch them in the throat. Well, then maybe a condenser would be the option there, because a condenser has higher sensitivity, higher pickup in how it works. It doesn't mean that the condenser will make it louder on the backside. It doesn't mean that dynamic versus condenser will be louder. It's how it's actually working. And we can talk further about that. Actually, we will here in a little bit. Hey, Meg, while I'm talking about this, can you... we'll hold off on this. Then it hits a pad. So what a pad is, if you look on the second box there, right there, that's pretty fun. Then we hit the pad. Right there, let me do this. Geeking out a little bit here. That's all good, right? Cool. Pad right there. What that does is if a signal is too loud or too hot, I'm going to use very generic and non-scientific terms, too hot or too loud, it cuts that level going into the rest of the circuitry by a certain amount. Typically 15, 20, 30 dBs in gain reduction. That's really just because that console is looking for a specific level of basically electricity of signal coming into that console. That's how it's designed. Grandma and Grandpa made it 100 years ago. We're still using the same standards. And so that's how that console is looking, I think, and stuff. And that's why you would use a pad. If you turn on it, or say you turn on a guitar, and hey, last week it was good. In the middle of service, all your lights are red. Or you can reach over real quick, hit that pad because something got jacked. Either the guitar player decided he wanted to crank it up, or something went crazy. I don't know. I've seen it all. Grab that pad, and then that's a quick fix, right? Now, everyone's going to still turn around and look at you because they figure that you're completely messing everything up, even though it's not your fault. It's always the band, right?
Is that similar to compression, or is
No, this is literally just changing the level by a set amount of the incoming signal.
Take the whole signal down.
Yeah, it's just a quick, instead of using the, and we'll get to it, it's just a quick pop down. Right? Then we hit a preamp. So this is the crucial thing that I really didn't learn until years after I started doing techie things. What a preamp is actually made for. Anybody have an idea of what, and I'm going to be super non-general here because it is crucial to our discussion. What is the entire purpose? You're not allowed to answer. You're not allowed to answer. You can answer. What is the only purpose for a preamp?
Make the signal larger.
I think it would just take a measurement of something coming in before it decides what it's gonna do, but I have no clue.
Well, that's a meter.
The purpose of a preamp is to amplify low-level signals to the operating level of your recording gear. Microphone signals are usually
Bill.
way below the
That's what I'm
nominal
saying.
operating
Let me drop kick. Which brings me to the point that life is open book, right? So at all times, please Google, please ask. Don't think you need to know everything, because the more I do this, the more I realize I don't know everything on a daily basis. Almost. Actually, that's too much wording, but in general, the only purpose of a preamp is to get whatever that signal is to +4 line level. That is crucial and key. Every audio console is designed around the technology of 100 years ago, whatever that looked like, plus or minus a decade there, that electrical signal is operating at +4 line level internally in the audio board as it goes through all the other circuits in that console. Okay? There's a lot of different theories about that, but I want to make that statement as this is why the preamp exists, because that's going to be crucial to how we look at gain structure moving forward. So a preamp, we'll talk about that. Then you've got line inputs. So line inputs are signals that are coming into the console that don't need to be electrically adjusted, impedance matched, electrically adjusted. They're coming in possibly at that +4 line level already. If it's consumer, -10, we're not going to go into that, but plus or minus those line levels, so they don't need any other types of matching. They just kind of come into the console. Then you go to the trim. So then we're talking about, the preamp and the trim are very related. Sometimes you can have both, like the SQ. Typically on consoles, over the years, they've adjusted those to have independent ones. You have preamp for preamp trim for the XLR or the mic inputs, and then you have line trims for the line inputs, or you have them combined, any number of things. But for generality, we're going to talk about just the trim as the overall gain knob on your console.
I wondered if trim and gain was sort of the same. Okay.
Yeah.
It's the same.
And back to, hey, this manufacturer can't design this console because they have to pay XYZ manufacturer for that naming and how they design that. So we'll just call it something different just for the sake of it. Just because, if we want to charge someone $1 billion, we need to call it something different just so we can, right? So the trim is actual knob that turned that level up and down to get to +4 line level in the console, right? All right, polarity. Polarity, if you watch any of the videos, not get too much into this, but basically audio has a phase. So if we very basically, this is what sound looks like. You have a positive and a negative side to all sound waves. All right, we're super simple. Polarity basically means flipping the signal 180 degrees. So instead of doing that, if we hit the polarity switch, sometimes it's called phase, and that's okay, but that's incorrect. And we're just doing the opposite. All right? Let's see. So what does that sound like? beans. Cool beans. Okay, set up. Let's do a sine wave. Here's the most annoying sound in the world. If you've ever been around a sound guy for more than 2 seconds, you've either heard this or you've heard this. And then you think to yourself, stop it. All right, so this is a sine wave. It's basically that at 1,000 hertz in its purest form. So when it comes to sound, we have a range that human hearing can hear if we have perfect human hearing and we're an 8-year-old little girl. I don't mean that jokingly, but that's the standard. I don't know why, but because they have better hearing. And I'll just stop for a second, which is kind of a cool thing, but it's important. Women and men do hear differently, both long-term and psychoacoustically. So for in general, because there's not much research on women's hearing, ironically, everything's based around male hearing, and even then it was only based on basically the hearing aid industry, which is sad. But in general terms, because there's women in audio that are doing this work for us, thankfully, that are doing great work and getting this research out there. And this pertains to in-ears, Drew. But basically, women over the length of their lifespan hear better over that course of time. Men's hearing starts degrading in the high frequency. We start losing that high-end clarity in our hearing as the older we get. Now, the caveat to that is that men can focus on sound better than women. So if I say that by saying that if you listen to headphones, especially in-ear mixing and that kind of thing, and you create a dynamic mix with a lot of moving parts, left and right this, and reverb and delays and all this stuff, men can localize that sound and prefer to have a much more complex mix to listen to than women do. It's really weird. So if you're doing mixing for in-ears for women, they actually prefer a much simpler mix than what men do. And men can localize sound better than women, especially up close. So you might have a worship pastor or leader or whatever that goes, hey, my left and right keyboard, they're not really panned left and right. The same, if it was a woman, be like, yeah, I don't care. I want a lot less of everything and just my vocal. So all that to say is that's in generalization, but it is a thing. And so as you're working with guys and girls in your worship areas, be cognizant that there are complete differences. They aren't just yelling at you because, oh, the girl singer is losing her mind and this worked just fine for everybody else, but because she's a girl, she's going to... No, actually, there are physiological reasons why that's different for them. So we can talk more about that offline, but keep that stuff in mind. All right. And squirrel. Where are we at? Oh, yeah, sine wave. So human hearing, 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. That's the range of human hearing. We won't go too much into that, although we'll be seeing that as a graph. Typically what you'll be seeing in general, because we'll see this on a lot of screens, is you'll see kind of this block thing here. I use the worst color ever. It looks terrible. And you'll see something like 20 and 20K, 2K, and you'll see kind of a line like this, and you'll, right, see a digital console, you're looking at REQ, all this sort of analyzation. That's kind of what you see. You see this 20 and 20K. That basically just stands for the lowest range of hearing that we can hear, which technically we can hear, but it's really more felt. And the highest range of hearing that we can hear, which is typically dog whistles, right? That's just a quickie. Hey, this is what it is. You're going to see that a lot. We're not going to go into that, but there it is. So all that back to saying is this 1,000 kilohertz, 1,000 hertz. Y'all about to get a lesson in super jerry-rigged. Oh, I don't want that. stupid glare. I apologize, but it is kind of glary. There's not a whole lot I can do about it. Come on, screen. There we go. Cool. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Your iPhone and $20 off Amazon, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get you this. Well, and $15 off iOS store because the built-in camera doesn't. There. I digress. All right. So this just so you kind of see what I'm doing. Not that what I'm doing matters, but as I'm doing it, you can actually see I'm not just playing Pac-Man up here doing stuff. All right. So this 1,000 hertz right here, 1,000 kilohertz, or 1,000 hertz, same thing, or 1 kilohertz actually. All right. So this is what you're hearing. So I'm going to play this tone, and you're probably only going to be here in the middle. So real quick, people that are on the outsides, probably Drew, you already know about all this. You don't really care, but you can stretch your legs. You guys here, if you want to walk up and kind of go towards the middle, I'm going to turn these up, and I'm going to turn. Justin, you're good there.
I actually wanted to see what it sounds like out there because I watched this in the video and I was like, I couldn't really move around the room. So.
Well, we're doing it acoustically, so it's not going to be. Dang it, I can't say certain terminologies. It's not going to be perfect summation, but we'll get some ideas that something's going to happen. Let me shut this off. So you guys see that here? Polarity? All right, so what's happened in there? Oh, let me turn myself on since I'm canceling that signal out. Now, if you go far enough that way, actually no, because it is perfect summation and in the console because it's coming out. I would have had to. Oh, here, I got it. I got you. All right. All right. So hypothetically, as you move towards center, you're going to start hearing it drop out, and then as you move away from center, you're going to hear it again. Yes, that's what's happening? Someone tell me? This is the worst. What you definitely hear is wah, 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 wah. You hear that a little bit more? And you got, okay, let me try the old pink. Let's see here. Let's try this. Turn this down. Oh. Ha. All right, so I didn't pan something correctly. Let me try that again. Here's a sine wave. It'll get louder and softer in the middle. So if you all want to kind of socially distance, get in the middle. Let me take it out. I'll take it out of polarity and back into polarity, and you'll hear and feel that switch. So the irony is what I'm hearing is actually, turn this back on. I'm actually hearing it out of phase when it is in phase because of the room acoustics, and then it puts it back in phase because it adds stuff. Dang it. All right, so let me put it back to pan center here. Oh yeah, you guys can kind of see me doing things here. That's cool. I'm gonna be super picky about that. There's the center. All right, turn this back on, and we're gonna hear it disappear. Boom. So, because it's perfect summation, we're dealing with acoustics. Acoustics being in my existence. So out of phase, back in phase, or yeah, back in phase, out of phase. And let me say that again, polarity, sorry. It is a point of phase, but we're talking about polarity because this console, there are some consoles where you can vary that, but this is on most consoles, it's 180 degrees. So basically what this is doing when I hit that button is it's doing this. Anyone remember basic math? 1 minus 1, right? So 1 minus 1. Yep.
You might be getting there, and this might not be in your schedule for today. But
Look, you're cool.
so I watched the video on this, and that's why I was walking back and forth because they were talking about like if you go in certain areas of the room, you would hear it. In other areas of the room, you wouldn't hear it. But besides my subwoofer on the surround sound at home,
Mm-hmm.
I've never experienced any kind of polarity issue except for one day I noticed that it sounded different when I flipped that switch. And so I left it on the one that sounded better in the room. But when is this going to come up as a problem? Like ever?
Every day, acoustics is a problem.
Okay. Well, I guess, again, only like the short period of time that I've been working on the soundboard, I haven't heard anything like not exist because of a polarity mismatch. So
Maybe not a polarity mismatch, but you have tons of phase mismatching in that room. And we'll talk about that later. Yes, Mr. Stuckers?
One thing, just maybe to simplify this, polarity is absolute, phase is relative.
Yes.
So, when you're talking about real world situations, if you have two signals out of a keyboard, and one of those is reversed, the signal will tend to cancel, other than what's kind of not mono. Like in a drum case, for example, you can do an upper and lower snare mic. If those are not phased right or polarity right, you'll get all sorts of cancellations and coloration of the signal of the snare mics. So it depends on the situation you're in. Sometimes you'll never ever have an issue with it. But some things are very specifically, I need to adjust these, I need to inverse the polarity of this, so those kind of things will happen to you. And the key really is polarity is absolute. There is a 0 to 180 change. It is a phase change, but it is a hard 0 to 180. But phasing with mic positions and choir mics are spaced differently, those things, those are phase relationships. And you'll find that sometimes inverting that polarity will help that signal to sound better. Sometimes it will cancel it more.
okay.
All right. And I'll pause you there because we went way more into that than we should have.
Just real quick. Is
But-
this more inclined to be an instrument problem or a voice mic problem? Because the only thing I can think of that I've heard is when we're trying to pull somebody up to hear them better, then you suddenly begin to get that why whirl.
You see the creepy, cheesy grin on my face?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes is the answer.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
And we'll do some actual examples
Very good.
so you can actually hear some different.
Okay.
And so what you're describing, I'm not saying we're going to get to that. Yes.
All right.
So we scrolled way out when we talked about polarity.
That was helpful.
But I wanted to lock that in what polarity was. Polarity is absolute, phase is relative, and we all know how much we love our relatives, right? That's a good. I hadn't thought about that before. I need a T-shirt. Peyton, write that down. That was really good.
You got
All right.
it recorded, you can play it back.
I do have it. Unfortunately, I have it recorded, so I won't be here next month. If you guys know why Gabriel got fired from Lakes Church, tune into YouTube.
Humor.
Yeah, my humor is not absolute. It is relative. That is for sure. All right, so polarity. We're gonna filters. So filters. If you watch the video, we're talking about high and low pass filters. And let me throw this back on. Pink noise. When you hear pink noise, just for the reference, it's randomized noise at all frequencies. That 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, and we use that as a measurement noise, basically. A lot of times it's just like, is it on? Oh, I hear pink. Okay, we're good. But we actually use that in measurements, and we won't discuss that too much, other we'll show you some things later on. But that being said, I just want to show you this. Hey, I'm still online. Hey guys. All right. So when we talk about filters, let's see, we'll turn this on. You'll hear, let me pull this back out a little bit. Come on, girl. Come on. Which way is it? There we go. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's do, well, how did that, oh, because I was playing around. All right, so yes, I should have a high pass and a low pass somewhere. Hold the phone. Oh, because I'm looking at the wrong channel. There's that. There's that. All right. So remember I was telling you about this 20.20 to, well, actually it just shows 10, but 20 would be all the way over here. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you guys. The delay's crazy, right? So what a filter is, we're gonna do this noise here. Love it. Just get used to that. If you don't love pink noise by now, don't worry, you will. And we'll have that on. Oh, it doesn't give you a slope. That's terrible. All right. So very briefly, the magic of low cut, high pass filter, low pass filter. So it's easier to think of it as low cut, high cut. You're low cut, you're cutting the lows. High cut, you're cutting the highs. High pass filter, you're letting the highs go through, so you're cutting the lows. Low pass filter, you're letting the lows go through, you're cutting the highs. It's the same exact thing, just grandma and grandpa wanted to sell different products, right? Here we go. So just watch the magic screen here. Oh, let's do a little some of that. Sorry about the glare. It is what it is. It's a terrible room, but there you go. So here is, you don't need to be super low or super loud. Here's the low cut. Cut the lows, you can hear the highs. Here, also can be heard in your latest dubstep album. And the highs. Oh, darn it, hold on. That's my mic. I don't know why I defaulted there. There we go. Right? All right, cool. So high pass, low pass filters. We'll talk about why we use those, but that's what it is. Then from there we go to our equalizer. You guys saw here. We're still on that page. Put a little, some of that. And I'll just move my finger here. We're just adjusting those frequencies. Cutting them. If you go down, you cut. If you go up, you add. Also to be used in your latest dubstep album. Okay. From there, let's go back here. All right, from there, we go to our channel fader. Now, you see the little dash marks. For the most part on these papers, the dash marks shows an optional direction, optional point of coming in and out of that signal. The arrows do matter, plus or minus a typo. I'll apologize now if there's a typo. Actually, I'll apologize now because there probably is a typo. Wow, we're running out of time. Actually, we're probably going to make it. So out of that, let's skip the channel fader for just a second. Go to the right. You see here the aux send. We have an optional pre and post fader. Pre and post means before or after that fader is where you're grabbing a copy of that signal or you're sending a copy of that signal somewhere. Then you go to your aux send, pre or post fader. I thought I fixed this. That actually should just be aux send master there. And that's kind of redundant. My bad. I suck. So aux send master. So if you're looking at your console, you're going to go, oh, I want to send this to the aux 1. Turn it up. From there, it's going to go to an aux send master. So you're going to find that aux send master. That aux send master typically goes to an effect, but it can go to monitors. It can go to whatever you want. Sky's the limit. Knock yourself out. And then from there, it can go to effects or not, or to wherever. If it's going to effects, typically the effects will go to an auxiliary return, which is actually what an aux stands for. Auxiliary return, and that'll come back in. Now let's come back over here to the channel fader. So you can see that aux can send before or after the fader. So if I do channel fader, I don't have an aux here to demonstrate that. That's fine. So if it's before the aux, that means if I move that fader up and down, that signal will not be affected. If it's post the fader, if I turn that fader up and down, that means that signal will go up and down with me, with that fader move. So that'll drive your musicians crazy. Like, why is my guitar going up and down every time you're mixing? Check. Hey, might be pre or post. That's funny now. Suzanne's like, all right. And then from there, we go to the odd even pan, which is at least on this console. Dun, dun, dun. This console is right here. So that's just taking left or right in the console. Then there's two different options there that you can go. You can go to your audio subgroups. You go to your main left-right output. Now, in all honesty, audio subgroups and your main left-right out are just buses. So buses is basically just a highway that you can send signal through them. Different manufacturers call them mixes. Any types of terminology. Basically, even auxes are just mixes. They're just another bus. So the terminology, it's kind of interchangeable, but when you hear me say bus this, bus that, it just means basically a highway in your console that we're sending signals through. We'll discuss what audio subgroups, how to use those and what those kinds of things are, but think of it this way. Audio subgroups lets you control a chunk of groups of audio. The same thing just as a master. It's just an option to send things to. And we'll discuss why we want to use that. Or at least why I would do it and why I want you guys to think about doing it. Now, caveat to all this is you're going to leave today, hopefully with at least one aha moment. It might have not been audio related. It might have been, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing, which is accurate. But don't be too keen on changing your stuff. Like, oh, I learned something new. I got to change everything now. I got to fix it. Pause. Breathe. Take 5 minutes. Breathe. Learn a little bit more. Have those communications with your leaders. Gary, George, Justin, talk to me. Let's have a game plan. If there's anything in your mixes that need to change and to be adjusted, let's do that so that everybody's on board. The whole team is on board. Let's not just leave our team hanging on like they show up and like, not only is it a completely different setup, but we threw in a completely different audio board. That makes no sense whatsoever, right? We don't want to do that. So there may or may not be things that will adjust wherever you are, but let's just take a holistic approach and not completely kill each other. All right. That is basically how the basics of signal flow happen. Let me go back to this because I pointed at it and it's not there. Your mic comes on a mic cable. You plug it into the back of a soundboard. You've got all your stuff, your phantom power if it's a condenser or if it's active. Let me just change that terminology. If it's an active device, whether it's a mic or a DI, flip that on or not. Then you have your pad. If it's too loud and you can't turn it down on the console, that's what the pad's for. Right? Click. All right, we're good. We're in the ballpark again. Then your preamp is that circuitry to turn whatever that signal is up to line level, which is where we want to be. Then you've got your line input to your trim. From there, we go to our polarity. Then we go to our filters. We go to our EQ. From there, we can send to auxes if we want to. We don't necessarily have to. Maybe if we want to, for monitors, for record feeds, for posterity, whatever. Then you've got your channel fader. And there you have your mute, which I apparently just realized I forgot to put in there. Your channel fader and mute. Of course, you can turn down your channel fader. It's the same thing. So there you go. And then from there, you go to your odd even pan, left and right. Oh, and I skipped one of the important things is your routing matrix. What is a routing matrix? Well, you're telling something to go somewhere. Specifically, at that point in the signal flow, do I want to take this signal, go to my subgroup bus, or do I want it to go to my main left-right bus? And so on a lot of older analog gear, you would have a little button that would say either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Maybe there was a button that said LR for left, right. Peyton, would you mind on break? Can you grab those two little consoles from Death Church and bring them in? And so that's what the routing matrix is, but it is a thing in the console to be aware of. We're going to get into what it actually looks like on this console in general. That's what it is. So we're now going to take let me take 1 second. Any questions about, we're going to be talking about signal flow all day. Like, this is going to be our guideline. Like, everything we do, oh, remember this thing, here's where it shows up in the signal flow. Or remember this thing, this is where it is. All day, signal flow, signal flow, signal flow. Because if you can master this at the basics, doesn't matter what console you go to, you can plug it in, turn it up, make noise. Any questions about this particular chart? Clear as mud? Glazed over? Yes? Cool? Bored? Yes.